Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a disassembly video for you on this guy. This is the Dutch Blade Works, I think Dutch Blade Works, the Xerxes, which is a collaboration between Gudy von Poppel and Tashi Bharucha. You can see in there Tashi and Gudy down at the bottom there. We'll see that a little more deeply shortly. But one thing that's cool about this knife, and the thing that makes this knife maybe most interesting, is the taper to it. Take a look at this. This side of the knife, it's full blade width. This side of the knife, it's much thinner. So this is a knife that actually gets thinner as you go from here to here. This is really common in blades, right? You know, where you have the blade start thicker and then it gets a distal taper going on. For instance, this little guy in the pocket here is doing that. This is the Herman Knives Dragonfly. You can see here blade starts thick, thins out. But with this guy, what they've actually done is they've brought the handles back closer together as well, so that the knife actually progressively gets a little bit thinner as it gets closer and closer to the clip, which is a really cool thing and something I have literally never seen before. That doesn't necessarily mean it's a complete innovation, but what it does mean is that it's unusual in the modern pocket knife market. So let's take this guy apart and see how they've done that and, check everything out. So immediately what we're seeing here, and by the way, if you're ever curious about any of the tools I'm using for my disassemblies, just go to nickshabazz.com/tools. You'll get a video that shows you how all of those things are. Okay, so it looks like we've got a pivot here, and then we've got these two guys right here. There does not appear to be a screw involved in the clip that's going through to the other side, so I should just be able to unscrew these two screws on the handle here, and then that should do me what I need to do, so to speak, and then pop this guy out. Now this whole thing is starting to come apart. What you want to be careful with here is that, because the blade is a little closer to the side there, you want to just be a little careful with that. You want to make sure that you can... Come on. There we go. Come on, come on, loose. There you go. Just make sure that you're not rubbing the blade against the inside of the liner too much. It shouldn't be a major issue, but still, something to consider. And I'll just pop this guy the rest of the way loose here. And then the knife will probably disassemble itself in my hand. Oh, weird. This is one of those where, okay, check this out. They've got themselves a non-free spinning pivot screw, but the little notch is machined into this part. So the part that you're unscrewing is actually the barrel. It's the part that the pivot screws into rather than the part with the threading on it and whatnot. Well, the external threading, I suppose. There's probably a way to talk about that if you're a machinist and or a brilliant man, but I am neither of those things, so therefore, here we are. I'm doing my best over here. But what we can see here is that the pivot itself, the part you unscrew, is bare, and the part that turns is this chunk back here. Interesting. Not terribly remarkable either way, just a slightly different choice. I think I gave the nickshabazz.com/tools thing already, so we can just go ahead and jump in. I'm cleaning this guy up. I'm using some rubbing alcohol here, and I'm just going to get in here and try and remove as much gumption as I can and just get everything lubed up nicely. This is the first video I've recorded for the channel in the better part of a week. Maybe that's not true. Maybe 6 days or something like that. Either way, I took a very brief little hiatus. This is not, a problem necessarily. Well, I sure hope it's not a problem, but there's always I feel a little bit of pressure, right? That's one of the downsides to doing, something like Patreon, etc., and having fans that are really, supportive. But, occasionally you get a little burned out feeling. And, I had some... I don't want to say that the comments got to me, but they kind of got to me a little bit. I had some situation just where people were just like, guys, come on. Why do I do this? I'm moving to Siberia and raising muskrats. I actually had a video on that probably has gone live by the time this has. But anyways, this was an interesting, taking that little break was probably helpful for my soul, just generally speaking. But I'm back, and it feels good, actually. That's how I know it was time. I looked over at my desk, and I saw this guy waiting, because this guy arrived, actually, while I was on hiatus, so to speak, which makes it sound a whole lot more dramatic. It's just like, how do you go on hiatus? You sit down, and you don't film yourself taking a knife apart for a week. Oh, wow, what drama. But anyways, seeing this guy on the table was like, okay, you know what, it's time. This sounds nice. Let's do that. Let's clean this guy up. And that gives me the ability to actually start carrying it and start getting ready for the review. So there you go. One thing to note on this guy is that you've got the backspacer here, and you've also got pins, by the way, both a lanyard pin and then an internal pin here that keeps the backspacer in position. But there is no internal milling on this guy. I am not in any way, shape, or form complaining about that, by the way. I don't feel like that's a problem. The knife is well balanced or anything, but there isn't any. The way that they've done this is already complicated enough with this distal taper and the whole thing. So you can see here the backspacer thins out and everything. You can also see, by the way, the Tashi Gudy little thing in there. But this is such a weirdly machined knife anyways that that's not a complaint in any way, shape, or form. But it is the nature of the beast, so to speak. So you should keep that in mind. Everything else looks like standard WE knives fare. And I believe this is a WE knives made knife where you've got ceramic ball bearings, ceramic detent ball, and 20 CV, that is, these days. One thing to note, though, is that they did not... They acid washed the blade, but they did not mask off this little area here. It's a minor ding. The action is pretty smooth anyways, but it could have been a little smoother had they done that route instead. Okay, this part needs to go right here. And I'm going to start putting this guy back together. The pivot needs to slide through this side here. Yeah, I'm just checking to make sure. You see how this washer has a little groove already worn into it from the bearings? That's the side you want to have facing the bearings, you know, obviously. Maybe not obviously, but still. You want to put knives together the way you found them, generally speaking. But anyways, so I'm putting this guy back together using some 10-weight nano oil here for lubrication, just because it tends to work very well with these kinds of flipper knives and tends to stay in place for a little while. I'm going to go ahead and put some on the detent ball as well, and I'll go ahead and I'll coat the pivot a little bit here, just to make things a little nicer. I'm slightly over-lubricating. That's the nature of my existence, but there you go. Next thing is going to be to put in the stop pin, because that needs to be a thing. The stop pin goes in this little hole right here and just slides right down. Come on. Down. In. Go in. Go into the hole. Bro. Hole. Hole, bro. There we go. All right. Nice. Down. All right, beautiful. So we've got that popped into place, and actually, before I do that, I should lubricate the tent ball path a little bit. This little area here where the tent ball slides should probably get a little bit of loving, lubricationally speaking. All right, so and I'll go ahead and anything worth lubing is worth over-lubing, right? That's not necessarily the case, actually. That's a way to damage equipment. Have I put in both bearings? Did I put in this bearing? I did. All right, good. A little out of practice here, guys. It's been a full week, which, honestly, with the exception of moving across the country, and even then I think I filmed some stuff, that's probably the longest break I've ever taken. No, that's not true. I've taken some actual, like, physical vacations where I was, like, or vacations or work stuff. You know, you spend freaking 2 weeks in South Africa. It's like, yeah, you're not going to film a video. Although it'd be kind of cool to. And a lot of good knife makers in South Africa, but that's not why I was there. Anyways, I digress. So let's go ahead and drop everything back into place here. Making sure I don't have any parts left over. Shouldn't. Now what I want to do is actually, I want to try and get, because this thing's sort of built backwards. What I'm going to do here actually first is put a little thread locker on this guy. And I'm going to use some of this thread locker on a stick here, just to pop everything in. There we go. And what I'm going to do here is just kind of thread this guy down onto this a little bit. There's going to be a certain point where I'm going to need it to seat down in there, and I'll do that by turning the screw on the other side. But for the moment, I just kind of need it to stay in place. Now, next step is going to be to pull this guy out a little bit and then try and seat these pins in the back spacer as they need to be. So there we go. That is all seated. The pivot is now roughly in place. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to close... Actually, no. Before I go any further with the pivot, I'll go ahead and I'll install the handle screws. Just that way the back part isn't coming apart on me as I'm doing this. Again, I'll use a little bit of blue Loctite here. And we'll go ahead and put this in here. I gotta say, the construction on this guy, that distal tapering handle thing, it's not very often that there's a modern, Chinese-made, and I'm not dissing on China necessarily, I'm just saying that a lot of the stuff that's being sent overseas these days doesn't tend to be some of the more innovative work. It tends to be custom makers doing random weird things these days. But anyways, Maybe that's completely unfair. I don't know. Either way, you know, knives out of Wee's factory don't necessarily tend to be pushing the envelope here. But that is an envelope push. I feel very strongly that, you know, that distal taper thing, when I realized that, it was just like, whoa, that's new and unusual. So, okay, I'm just making sure that I've got everything, that I've got this pivot here seated properly, and it doesn't look like I do. So I'm doing a really bad job of making sure of it, right? Go ahead and turn this a little bit more here. Unfortunately, that's the downside to this approach. I'm assuming that there's a... I can, like, push this guy into place here and then just sort of rotate this in such a way that it ends up seating itself. Maybe I'm doing this in the wrong orientation. So I'm just going to kind of rotate this guy until I feel it pop into place. There we go. Okay, yeah, I had it exactly upside down. I just felt it pop down into that little groove there, so that'll let me fully tighten everything down here. Okay, so I'm probably way too tight here. We're dead centered, but no, actually, I'm not way too tight. Let's back it off a little bit just to see if I can do... Oh, hold on. See, look what just happened here. My pivot popped back up a little bit. As I was tightening things down there, the pivot started rotating, and as a result, I ended up unseating that. And, you know, what's the downside to that? Well, the downside to that is not only that next time you take it apart, it's not going to be free, or it's going to be free spinning. But the other downside to that is that if that does later on seat, if it does pop down into place, then your pivot is actually going to be, yeah, there we go. So I'm going to try and keep my finger on there just to make sure that we're not, there we go. But if it later does seat, then that means your pivot screw is going to be too loose. You'll get blade play, things like that. So, okay. Whoa, that got, okay, there's blade play though. So I need to tighten this up a little bit. Okay. Oh, it's not tight enough. Tighten it up a little more. There we go. The reason, and by the way I could tell that it wasn't tight enough is that the blade was favoring this side. And this is one of those where centering kind of needs to be dead nuts freaking on, or else it's going to be super apparent, right? Because, yeah, it's going to hit the side of the scale. That's, by the way, part of the reason that this probably isn't done very often. It's just because your centering needs to be perfection for this to work well. Yeah, there we go. Beautiful. All righty. You know, I think we're actually good to go there. So, and the action on this guy is a little bit smoother. Still a little bit scrapey. That's just probably because they didn't mask off that detent ball path. A little lazy, but frankly, it's your downside with your acid washes anyways. Can I loosen this up a little bit? I probably should leave well enough alone, but I feel like I can. Maybe that'll help. Yeah. Yeah, actually, that's so... Now the centering's a little off. One thing I will try, just to approach this, is to just holding the blade in the place I want it to, and then retightening these screws. There we go. Now centering is pretty much right on. No, but now we get a little play. All right, it really does need to be run tighter. And as a result, now everything is perfectly centered. Yeah. I think part of the resistance is just going to get that, the detent ball path masking thing, and that'll wear in over time. That's the nice thing about those issues, is that then, you know, as you carry this for, you know, years, that acid washing will wear off the detent ball path. And in fact, you can actually see the detent ball path ever so slightly, as I recall, at one point in time in the process. No? Oh, I'm thinking of a different knife. Don't mind me, guys. I'm crazy. Anyways, there you go. I hope this has been interesting to you, and that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.